I think it's a big opportunity for childhood in India, and we should see it as that. I'd like to restrict what I'm saying to the primary part. And there I see some very, very significant priorities that have been articulated. That it's always been known that early childhood education is important. But putting this continuum, starting from a couple of years before you enter standard one, whether it's 2 or 3 years, the policy says 3 years before, but I would say certainly at least 2 years before, till 2 years after. So, standard 1 and 2 and the 2 years before standard 1 or 3 years before standard 1, seeing that whole piece as a continuum, I think is extremely important. Early childhood has been accepted for a long time as an essential part of a child's growth. Obviously, the first few classes at school are important. But I think what the policy does is, A, puts it in a continuum, which means that it's, I think I've, said this before, it's a continuum of approach, of expectations, of teaching learning processes, of provision. So it's a continuum in every way. That I think the emphasis is new. Secondly, the big importance given to the fact that this is required for building foundations and building the foundations well. There's plenty in the document also to say that we need to approach this using very developmentally appropriate methods. And then there is a third part, which I think is not specified as clearly, but I am completely hoping that my interpretation is correct, is to say that these foundational skills are very important for the growth of anyone. And so we should also take the opportunity of the NEP and of the foundational literacy and numeracy mission to ensure that children who are beyond standard 3, who for one reason or the other have not acquired this kind of foundational grounding yet, should be given the opportunity to do so. So I think, a policy is a broad direction, and it is really up to a whole range of people to see how we translate that policy into practice and how do we sustain that practice. So, like many other things in India, we have on paper, things are often, make sense. But if there are parts to this policy that as people in the sector, or as people even more generally feel are very important, then the responsibility also of bringing that into action belongs, widely. Big point I would have in that primary section is that there is a lot of talk of assessment. And I think that just to keep in mind that the assessment is not to have board exams at standard 3. It's to really make sure and ensure that the goals that we've set out for our kids, that we are making good progress. And for that, this is not something that happens once in a year and at a certain point. It should be in the mindset of teachers, of parents, of everyone, to ensure that there is continuous progress that is going on. So I really like the word Anganwadi and preschool because they indicate completely different approaches to what those years should be like. And I think the new education policy has included a new word called Bal Vatika. Again, it has the word Bal in it, and it does not have schooling in it. So I think it's also important to signal to parents and to providers that these early years are to be used most productively for a broad set of capabilities being developed. And there are enough studies, including the ASR study that we did in 2019, to show that early cognitive abilities are very highly correlated with the ability to do all kinds of academic things well later. But if you don't have that broad cognitive base, it's not that you know numbers at age 4. It's that you can distinguish shapes, you know what is big and small, you're able to apply those in different mediums, you're able to speak your mind. It's not that you know letters and words, but the fact that you can actually hear a story and be able to, discuss it. These are broad sets of skills that we need to take the time to develop. So I think a big signal is to say that we need to do developmentally appropriate broad sets of skills in this first 5 years and not be hung up about the early start of academic learning, because that will in a sense narrow your possibilities. So the continuum, as I said, the approach needs to be of expectations. The approach needs to be of what are the activities that populate this set of years. And also, I think in that in that span, how do you look at progress? So if you look at progress as my son can now do a addition problem, as opposed to ask my daughter anything and she'll be able to give you a logic about how she's calculating. These are two very different signals of how we are looking at it. So it's not just what the government does or what NGOs do or what public school providers do. I think there is a massive orientation of our societal expectations of what we expect this foundation to have. I think the Anganwadi system is a very, very key part of the human development of India. And it has not received the kind of support. I mean, we expect our Anganwadi workers to do many, many things. Even in this COVID time, I would say Anganwadi workers have been way more in the front line than our school teachers, because they are the ones who are very closely connected to communities. They have some training on health. They have some training on nutrition. All of that could be vastly improved, but they are the multi-purpose. I mean, they are the Ma Durga of India. They have 10 hands and you expect that they should have 20 hands. But I think that the closeness to the families, the multi-sectoral connection that they have, I think that that has to be a base on which we build this foundational, growth of children, which means that the people, wherever they are, whether they're in school or in the Anganwadi system, who work with young children, need more support, more priority, and more resources. The resources may not always be money resources, because as a country, we are going to be strapped for financial resources for some time. But I think there is a lot of human resources that we have in plenty, which could be oriented to say, how do you support your child at home? How do you support your child in the neighborhood? So I think it's a big opportunity for childhood in India. And we should see it as that. I often hear this saying that, there's not enough financial resources. There never is enough financial resources in the world. But I think you have to constantly maximize what you have and at the same time look for where more resources can come. And resources are not always financial resources. There is a lot of time resources that people can give. We as Pratham work with both Anganwadis and pre-primary sections in school in quite a few states. And we have, for example, and I'm using this just as an example, in Anganwadis, we have a intervention in which the Anganwadi worker and the Pratham person together selects a young volunteer from the neighborhood who comes into the Anganwadi for an hour a day, plays one game, does one song and tells one story. There is no lack of such people who, if invited and oriented, can do that. What is the cost to this? The cost is a fraction. Is this person appropriately trained? You may argue most people in India and anywhere else in the world dealing with children are not appropriately trained. As a young mother, am I appropriately trained? No. I mean, I could be trained much better. But do I do the best job that I can in bringing up my child? Yes. And if I'm helped by other experienced people around me, I pick it up. We have been, as a country, above 95% enrollment for the 6 to 14 age group for more than 10 years. And this kind of an achievement happens when the policy, the practice, the perceptions, all are in sync. And that involves both government and people. If parents didn't want their children to go to school, none of this would happen. And so the parents working with the provisioning that the government provides or other players provide have gone hand in hand, that you achieve big things when there is a very large common goal that everybody is aiming for together. And so, the policies generally talk about what the government should do. I think it's also important to think about what the public should do. Now, what the goal is, I think, is to say that whether it is class 3 or class 5 or 8 or 10, I should achieve what that goalpost requires. It's not just years of schooling, but it is some associated call it years of learning or call it the value added. That is a lot of international agencies are now using this term called learning adjusted years of schooling. And therefore, I think in the new education policy, this stage-wise goal, at least in primary, to me is very valuable. It says that by the time you've finished up to grade 3, which could be the full 5 years before that, it should lead to having a child who is able to speak his own mind, able to read what they are given. She can look at what she's read and have a view on that. She's able to do some basic number knowledge, some basic operations. So this is the kind of person or the kind of skill set or the kind of capability, set that we need.